After the fuel switches of Boeing aircraft, it is now fuel valves that are in focus. India's aviation regulator, the DGCA, has ordered that all fuel switches across the Boeing fleet in India should be checked. In this, the aviation regulator is following the global pattern. Airlines like Etihad, South Korea, Singapore Airlines have all mandated a new check on the fuel test switches of the Boeing aircraft. This after a 2018 advisory revealed in the Air India crash report pointed to the fact that there could have been a locking mechanism problem with the fuel switches. But the story doesn't end there. After fuel switches, the focus is on fuel valves. In the headlines now is a UK aviation regulators directive reissued in 2025 on the 15th of May to be precise, just under 4 weeks before the Air India 17 crash, that speaks about a possible safety concern with the fuel valves on the Boeing aircraft. Though this particular directive was first issued in 2015, it was reissued, quoting the FAA, the American aviation regulator, in May 2025. All of this has raised the question as to whether a complication, a possible malfunction with the fuel valve, the fuel switches explains what happened on board Air India 171 in its ill-fated 32-second journey. I'm Barkha Dutt. You're with the Mojo Story. As always, our focus today continues to be on the many unanswered questions surrounding the crash of Air India 171 that crashed 32 seconds after takeoff. The preliminary crash report has now revealed that 3 seconds after takeoff, the fuel switches transitioned, I'm quoting the exact word used in the report, transitioned from the run mode to the cutoff mode. 10 seconds later, the pilots were able to bring it back to run mode. One engine showed signs of progress in relighting, the second didn't, but the plane hadn't gained altitude and it crashed into a building. There's also the much debated one sentence of a cockpit conversation that has been revealed in the preliminary crash investigation report, where one pilot asks the other, "Why did you turn off, or why did you put the fuel control switches into cutoff mode?" And the pilot replies, "No, I did not do that." Since then, the DGCA has mandated that fuel control switches across the Boeing fleet in India be double checked. This is what airlines across the world are doing. In the meantime, we have also accessed, can we please show it on the screen, a new directive that was reissued by the United Kingdom aviation regulator on the 15th of May 2025. Could we please have it up on the screen? And in this directive, which was first issued in 2015, reissued on the 15th of May 2025, the United Kingdom regulator quotes the FAA and talks about a potential unsafe condition affecting the fuel shutoff valves. When it comes specifically to the 787, the directive actually applies to a whole series of Boeing aircraft, but on the 787 specifically, the directive, which has been reissued after 2015, talks about a possible replacement test and or inspection of fuel shutoff valve actuators. So all of this is raising more and more questions about safety standards. Again, we're not trying to be inflammatory and draw a causal link. We simply do not know as of now what caused the crash, and the report actually raises more questions than it answers. In fact, an international pilots forum today has urged that everybody, and I'm going to read this out, everybody should stop guesswork, speculation, and hasty conclusions. This is what a global pilots forum is saying. It's also talking about the report saying by its very nature, it raises many questions, but it does not provide answers. It's warning against quote unquote extrapolation at a time when some within the community here, actually only one person to be precise, Captain Mohan Ranganathan, has pointed a finger at the pilots and suggested that this was quote unquote suicide or possible suicide mission, and his comments have been challenged, rubbished with great fury by the pilot community. Let me introduce our guests on the program today as we continue to look at all the mounting questions, all the things that the report actually tells us and doesn't tell us, and maybe it doesn't even know the answers to some of these questions. Let me first welcome to the program Captain Amit Singh. Captain Amit Singh is, of course, a well-known safety expert. He's in fact the founder of Safety Matters Foundation, and it's good to see you here on the program, sir. He's written some stellar pieces in the last week. Do look up his articles. They'll really teach you a lot. Also joining us is military veteran, Group Captain Bajpai. Welcome back to the program, sir. It's good to see you. Also joining me is Wing Commander Panikkar. Wing Commander Panikkar is, of course, a retired Air Force veteran, but he has flown the Dreamliner for a decade. And it's good to have you with us, sir. And aerospace engineer Professor Aditya Paranjpai is back with us. He's been working with us on trying to make sense of document after document after document. We're trying to understand this the best we can without slandering anybody, without smearing anybody, in particular without smearing those who are no longer alive to defend themselves. I'll start with you, Wing Commander Panikkar. You have flown this plane. You have experience of over 10 years of flying the Dreamliner. There are all kinds of theories that have been bandied about, from possible electrical failure to now, quote unquote, the transition of the fuel switches. There are pilots who have said it's simply impossible for anybody to basically take these switches from cutoff to run mode or the other way around in 1 second. And this is important because the report reveals that within 1 second of the other, the fuel switches did transition from run to cutoff mode. You have been on record saying this simply cannot be a pilot error. I want you to elaborate on that and also talk about now the fact that all of these switches are being tested across India, across the world, and also the new focus on fuel valves as an old advisory reissued by the United Kingdom makes it to the headlines again. Wing Commander Parekh.
Okay, Barkha, let's have a look at the available facts and let's have a look at the available processes and procedures that are involved. First and foremost, let's just look at the fuel control switch. The fuel control switch is normally touched only at the beginning of the flight when you start both the engines, and at the end of the flight when you switch off both the engines once you are in the bay.
Yeah.
So the normal procedure that happens is that as the pushback starts and the ground staff, the ground engineer or technician clears you to start, you start the engines one by one.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of the Dreamliner, which is a very advanced jetliner, in fact, they call it the electric jetliner, the engines normally have a simultaneous start, which is almost fully automatic. Now let's come to the issue at hand, and specifically to the report. When we examine the timeline of the takeoff, first and foremost, all the other speculations about having taken off in an incorrect configuration and without flaps, retracting flaps, and all that early can be safely laid to rest. This aircraft has performed exactly as advertised. It is taken off with flaps 5, it's taken off at the correct speeds, and it has rotated normally. In fact, everything was normal till 3 seconds after liftoff. And here's where the interesting things happen. The report says that the fuel control switches have transitioned. Now, transitioned is a peculiar term. It's not something that we see in normal aviation circles. It's not something that we in India normally use. It seems to be some sort of a technical term that they have transitioned from run to cut off. And that too within a period of 1 second. Let's visualize the cockpit for a moment. The takeoff roll is started. In this particular case, as the inputs suggest, the pilot flying was the person on the right, Clive, and the pilot monitoring was the captain, the pilot in command. The pilot flying has opened up power to approximately 40% N1, triggered the toga switches, and taken his hand off the thrust levers and put both his hands on the control column. Now the pilot flying has put his hand upon the thrust lever and is monitoring the progress of the takeoff roll. At a certain stage, at 80 knots, both the pilots check that their airspeed indicators are matching, and now you're waiting for the speed of V1, which in this case was apparently about 155 knots. Shortly after V1 is the rotation, or called the VR, at which the pilot flying has rotated the aircraft to achieve a smooth liftoff. Now, what is happening in the cockpit? The pilot flying has got both his hands on the control column. He is easing the control column backwards to raise the nose of the aircraft to the takeoff attitude, which would be approximately 15 degrees. The pilot monitoring is also watching this takeoff, watching it very closely. He is also looking outside, not inside. Now, when we go to the report per se, it says that the switch is, that is, both the switches have transitioned from run to cutoff. Now, if from a point of looking outside, I have to take my head inside the cockpit, refocus, find the switch, lift it off its spring-loaded catch, move it to the cutoff position, release it, and again do the same procedure upon the other switch. Identify it, pick it up, and now switch it off. Humanly, it's not possible to do all this, both these procedures, within 1 second. Even if you're a fighter pilot. I'm a former fighter pilot. Okay, I would be extremely challenged to do it under 1 second. I can't do it under 1 second. In fact, nobody can. Which leads us to believe, or leads me to suggest or believe, an electrical signal. You can have multiple electrical signals that can come within 1 second. You can split it up. It's an electronic signal. An electronic signal from either or both these switches can go within that 1 second. But physically, you can't move these switches in this 1 second. That's my first point. My second point is about this conversation that you've just mentioned. The logic of the conversation. Imagine that we know nothing about what's happening. But imagine that I'm the pilot flying, and I'm asking you, you're the person sitting on the right, Barkha, have you switched off the fuel control switch? Number one, what does it mean? I haven't done it myself. I'm asking you, right? Now you say, no, I haven't. So now both the pilots, let's take this at face value, are saying that neither of them have touched these fuel control switches.
Yeah.
And now imagine the chaos in the cockpit. Both these engines have cut off. The thrust is winding down. The nose of the aircraft is dropping. Lights are flashing. Everything is happening. You're still struggling to find out what the hell has just happened. A simultaneous dual engine failure is something that is simply not visualized at the point of takeoff. We have a checklist for a dual engine failure, but that is at all. You can't possibly imagine or write a checklist for a dual engine failure immediately after takeoff. Because
I have a question. Basically, you're saying that physically, the fuel control switches cannot be moved from their run mode, which they have to be in for the plane to take off, to cutoff mode. So if the black box records this as having happened, because that's what the preliminary crash report alleges has happened, you believe, and it's important because a lot of people who are not from aviation don't understand this, you believe the black box is reading electronic signals. It's not actually, it actually has no tangible evidence of the concrete physical movement of the switch. And therefore you believe that it's basing its conclusion on an electronic signal. Am I correct? Or are you saying that you believe the report is wrong and that within 3 seconds these switches did not transition or did not move?
Okay, let me just clarify once again what is it that I've said. Everything was normal till 3 seconds after lift off.
Yes.
We are clear on that?
Yes.
Around 3 seconds after lift off is the time at which the fuel control switches have transitioned from run to cutoff within 1 second.
Yes.
All that I'm saying is physically, for a person to take his eyes outside the cockpit, refocus inside the cockpit, find out where that switch is, pick it up, move one of them from run to cutoff, find the second one, again move that from run to cutoff within 1 second is not possible. So I'm not saying that the signal is incorrect. The signal very well may have come. In fact, the signal must have come. That's why you've had a dual engine failure. But I'm saying that the signal could have come from some micro switch, from some indicator somewhere, which is sent a signal of the engine failure, of the fact that the switch has transitioned. Now, whether this
Yeah,
transition is referring to a valve, whether this transition is referring to a switch, it's not very clear.
got
Additional
it.
point: the
Yeah,
fuel, the flight data recorder has is continuously is recording multiple parameters, including the position, the physical position of these switches. So all that I'm saying is correlate physically that if there is a switch position indication in your flight data recorder, correlate it with the time at which the flight data recorder says that the fuel
right.
control switch has transitioned. All that you need is a time frame.
Got it.
At this
Now,
particular time it's happened, what was the physical switch position?
now
Because
the
I
thing.
believe that you can't do this in 1 second.
Right. So the essence of your argument is that it is simply not possible to move two switches from run mode to cutoff mode, run mode to cutoff mode within 1 second, yet the black box records this as having happened within 1 second of the other. I want to bring in Captain Amit Singh at this point. You've been writing about a systemic issue and how, therefore, it's the systemic issue that we need to speak about. Now, one of the things that perhaps is illustrative of this systemic issue is what happens to safety notices, what happens to safety advisories. We have, because of the report, a knowledge now of a FAA advisory of 2018 that at that time was only an advisory. We are now seeing the world's airlines testing the fuel switches. In fact, I released moments ago on my social media feed an Air India circular. Even before the DGCA, Captain Amit, mandated this, Air India was quietly, since the 14th of July, testing the fuel switches and their health across its Boeing fleet. This is before the DGCA asked them to do this. This is important because Boeing had declared that everything is fine with us. So it's important to show that airlines were anyway quietly testing these fuel switches. Secondly, we have a GE, General Electric advisory from 2020 on an MN4 microprocessor. And we have an intriguing UK regulator directive on fuel valves, which was first issued in 2015. And their website is updated once again on 15th of May 2025. This concerns the fuel valves. Now, I am only looking at this to ask you to locate all of this information in the larger concerns you have about the systemic problems and the systemic questions we should be asking, instead of getting into pretty sort of clickbaity headlines about pilot errors, suicide theories, all kinds of conspiracy theories. I mean, maybe the aliens did it. I've actually seen people seriously even argue that at this point. Captain Amit, it's over to you.
Thank you, Barkha. So, an accident per se does not happen out of the blue. Aviation is a very safe mode of transport because there are multiple redundancies and so many safety features, safety barriers, thousands of them in every department, be it engineering, training, operations, you name it. So, per se, it is very safe and over-regulated. There are too
Yeah,
many regulations, right? So, an accident is a testimony that something major has happened, breached all these safety barriers. So, that is what it shows in aviation, not an ordinary transport accident, but in aviation means all these thousands of barriers could not stop that error. So that is a big concern for us, and that needs a bigger kind of an introspection, inquiry, investigation, whatever you may call. So, besides this AIB investigation, which will also look at the root cause. In India, per se, we do not go into the root cause. We go to the proximate cause, which means we find the first person or
yeah,
the organization or element and we blame it on them. That is the root cause. That is the job of the judiciary because they have to assign blame.
yeah,
So if a driver meets with an accident, so the judiciary will catch the driver, not the person who trained the driver and who checked the documents and all these things. So, but in aviation, we go for the root cause, which means we have to go deeper. If somebody was involved in an accident, why was he involved? The simplest form we use is ask the question why 5 times, and you'll get to the root cause. So if there was an error, why did the person make an error? Then you get to an answer. Then why did he do that? So that is how you get to a root cause. And we have something called a fishbone theory, which means that is a Japanese method in which every element is involved: the organization, the society, all the background. So everything has to be taken into consideration because these are all contributory factors. So not one factor leads to an accident. The pilot is the last person in the barrier to check this error. And if the error is too grave or unmanageable, then you see an accident. And the pilot is the first person to be at the scene of the accident because that is where he is, unfortunately. So looking at the systemic issues, there is something called the safety management system. That is the umbrella under which all the safety activities reside, including the investigation, safety promotion, etc., the policies. So we have certain glaring examples. For example, if the CEO of Air India says that
Yeah.
Boeing and there is no technical issue, the aircraft has been given a clean chit, the engine has been given a clean chit, which means that he has no understanding of that safety and how safety impacts. Because at this stage of investigation, it is just the beginning, 30 days. The investigation could turn on its head and anything could happen as and when new evidence comes to light. Now the engines will be sent for the testing, all the equipment will be sent for testing. So when we get the reports, then again the analysis will begin. So right now, how can we give a clean chit to anybody? So this is too nascent a stage. And when we talk about documents, again, safety management system and the ICAO, the United Nations body, talks about a document management system, which is important because it communicates documents throughout the company, between the regulators and between other stakeholders. And it classifies these documents into something which is important and something which is advisory or informatory. So anything which comes from the OEM, the manufacturer, or the state of manufacturer, in India per se, we adopt it in toto as it is verbatim because we do not have the capability to independently evaluate it. And for the past, 3-4 decades, we haven't done anything to upgrade our systems, people systems, so that we build that capability to analyze. For
You're,
example, when the
yes.
737 MAX accident happened,
Yeah.
so DGCA gave a statement that when it comes to a point that we have to get it back, we will do our own evaluation. But when it came to it, we said, okay, because EASA has done so many checks, so many flights, and it's found to be safe, so we adopt it. So that is the point. An advisory circular can be made mandatory by the state because it all depends on the unsafe condition or the safety of the situation. And an airline need not be told by the regulator how to handle a service bulletin or an AD. A service bulletin can be made mandatory even by the operator. So safety is not the minimum. Safety should be more than the minimum. DGCA
Yeah.
defines the minimum. So
Can I
for
ask you? Can I ask you though? I think you make a really important point about how you don't need to wait for the regulator to actually take certain steps, and that's precisely what's happened even with these fuel control switches. For example, the DGCA mandated it last evening. Air India began its checks on the 14th. Similarly, Etihad was an airline that took its own decision to do this. Given that. And I agree with you that it's too early to know what's happened. But if it's too early to know what's happened, it's also too early to be giving out clean sheets to Boeing and GE, and it's also too early to be blaming the pilots. We have to be able to say we don't know or we don't know enough, and sometimes we may never know.
correct. So all this speculation has started because there is lack of credible evidence, or we see a motive in the preliminary report. IQ defines it very simply that it has to be in the format of the final report. except that there need not be any analysis because it is too early. It is just a dump of information in the
Yeah.
first 30 days, whatever you get. And it should include your cockpit voice recorder transcript and your flight data recorder data, at least, and whatever else you have found out in due course. Here we have selective pieces which have been positioned in such a way so that the whole narrative shifts from the technical aspects to the pilot. For
Yeah.
example, that CVR transcript that we are talking about is not a CVR transcript. It is just what the investigator has heard and his version of it. Uh, the words have been manipulated by the media, the Western media especially. They
Yeah.
have added fuel after that
Yeah.
because the lines are spaced as such that after we talk about the fuel cutoff switches, then these lines are placed. So people are connecting those two. So there's no context in those two lines. Either you add a timestamp, which is a CVR transcript format, and the exact words. So why did you cut off? There is no fuel after that. People are adding fuel. Or the same conversation, they're talking about fuel and cutoff. It could be anywhere during taxi or any other situation. We don't know. Anything is possible at this stage. So either you do not give this or you give the entire CVR data so that people are more aware. They need not analyze, but at least we have trust that we are
Yeah.
going down the right route.
I,
Uh,
I totally agree with with these points that both Wing Commander Panikkar and Captain Amit Singh have made. Let me bring in Group Captain Bajpai at this point. I think even global pilots forums today have urged everybody to stop the speculation, to stop the extrapolation, to stop the hasty conclusions, to be able to say, give the process time. But I do think that the problem is the way the report has spoken about the last conversation between the pilots. It has led to a lot of speculation that one pilot was accusing the other pilot of cutting off the fuel switch. And as Captain Amit just pointed out, actually, well, we lost Group Captain there. Let me bring you, Aditya, in on the same point that it's, the Global Pilots Forum statement actually says that do not extrapolate. We simply do not know right now. Do not extrapolate. And it specifically says that the report, by its very nature, raises questions that it doesn't answer. Aditya, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Barkha. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So again, sort of trying to keep it balanced there. I would have actually liked to see the most of the CVR transcript. I mean, as the panelists mentioned earlier, without seeing the entire transcript, it's not clear the sequence in which these events have occurred. Let's also not forget that all of this has happened within a crucial 4 to 5 second window from the time, starting approximately ground up plus 3 seconds up until which point things were normal, all to the, and then just maybe another 3 seconds down the line. And for some reason, the way the report is currently structured, although it's tried to give us some of the facts, it seems to have possibly either decided that what needs to go in there is not relevant, or it just seems to have decided that maybe whatever is given to us in the present form is enough for us to draw some kind of a meaningful conclusion, and that obviously unfortunately hasn't happened. So I mean, if you think about, both Wing Commander Panikkar and we have 3 pilots here who are all very experienced. I mean, the first thing that they would probably try and do after looking at the timestamps is to say what all normal things happened during that time. So, for example, after 3 seconds, once you're 50 feet above the ground, you expect someone to call out gear up. I mean, positive rate of climb, gear up. Did that happen at all? We don't know. We know the gear didn't go up, but that does not mean that a call went in. Also, what's also interesting here is, when you look at how the positions in the cockpit work out, again, I think Captain Panikkar will probably know better than I do about this. And this is what I've also found a little bizarre is, when the pilots ask, did you cut off? What was the first cue that somebody got that there was a cutoff? Was it oral? Like, did they hear the switches physically move? Was it an alarm from ICAS? Was it something that they saw on the display which alerted them? Was it a change in the sound from the engine? Now remember, experienced pilots who've flown on the airplane for 8,000 or 9,000 hours are likely to respond to the smallest change in their environment, which is sound and sight. And unfortunately, none of that is clear to us. So the pilot asking, was there a cutoff, doesn't say as much as the pilot saying something along the lines of, what I'm hoping the CVR would give
Yeah.
us is, what was the queue? And we don't know what that queue is. So at this point, it's just left hanging in the air.
So the ambiguous wording has left a lot of speculation. There's one other thing that I would have personally, looked for the timestamp on, but maybe it's not available. The report includes a third CCTV image. If anybody wants to come in on this, Wing Commander Panikkar or Captain Amit, and I see Group Captain's also back with us, so I'll come to you in just a second. This image is of the rat deploying. Now, the rat is supposed to deploy automatically if the engines fail, but there is no timestamp for this rat deploying. I don't know if I'm asking a silly question here, but wouldn't the timestamp of this actually tell us at what point the engine stopped functioning? And therefore, the timestamp, would it be relevant, Aditya? Would it be relevant?
Absolutely, because what I've got from talking to some of the engineers is that the rat deploys almost instantaneously. So it's a matter of a second or two. So the time of the rat deployment -1 or 2 is the time when the engine cutoff actually happened.
Yeah.
Now, it's perfectly possible that in terms of information, it may not add anything new. I mean, we have obviously in the preliminary report, we have the timestamp for when the switches transitioned, as they
Yeah.
put it. So in that sense, it may not add anything new, but it's a sanity check that maybe could have been provided.
Yeah, let me bring in Group Captain before we lose him, and then I'll come back to Captain Amit and Wing Commander Panikkar. Group Captain Bajpai, I think your network's a bit dodgy today. Go ahead and make your point, sir, before we lose you again.
Ma'am, first of all, my sincere apology to you
No
and
problem,
all the
sir.
panelists. Because of heavy rain over here, the connectivity is the issue.
No
Before
problem,
I
sir.
continue, I would like to make few minor disclosures, voluntary disclosures that I had mentioned earlier also in your program, that I follow Audi Ultram Patrum, which says law of natural justice. It's our bad luck. Those poor pilots are not among us to defend themselves. This is one point. I strongly
Yeah.
follow this philosophy. Second
Yes.
point is that I am not biased to any of the stakeholder, be it pilot, engineer, Boeing company, GE company, Government of India, DGCA, or AIIB, or Air India operator, or for that matter, anybody. Now, third point, I am going, whatever we are discussing at this place, our main reference point is the preliminary report submitted by the investigating committee. They have submitted. So either we should totally discard this report, or we should accept this report based on our observation. Now, further assumption, I strongly believe what they have written. Whosoever has made this report and whosoever has done the investigation, they are responsible enough and they are accountable enough. Though airline is written over here that it is not for any court procedures. But the second line speaks of this report. The document has been prepared based on preliminary facts and the evidence collected during the investigation. So
But can I interrupt you? Can I interrupt you there? Sorry, sir. But there is so much the report doesn't tell us. You know, when we lost you, we were discussing.
Ma'am,
Okay,
I'll come back.
just one interjection, brief
Okay, ma'am.
interjection. We
Okay,
were
ma'am.
discussing that the CVR conversation does not, it quotes selectively, right?
Okay.
It doesn't even
Okay.
give a complete sentence. It doesn't even tell us which pilot said what to whom. People are
will
just assuming. One second. It doesn't tell you the timestamps of these conversations. It doesn't tell you the timestamp of when the rat was deployed. It is a selective quoting of the CVR for sure.
I
We think.
100% agree with you, as well as Captain Amit, as well as Captain Panikkar, that
Yes,
this
Wing Commander.
report,
Yeah.
he is a captain also.
Okay.
The report,
That's true.
report,
That's true.
report is lacking in many fronts. But
Yeah.
what they have given, from those I have picked up 3 points. Number one point, they have taken, page number 5 reads, they have taken on board the experienced pilots, engineers, aviation medicine specialists, and aviation psychologists, such a beginning of report. I just mentioned this point over here. Now I move to page number 14, which says one pilot asked another pilot that I am 100% in agreement with Captain Amit. The CVR readout will specifically speak P1 what he has spoken, P2 what is he has spoken, what is area mic recordings are there. So all those things are missing. I presume and assume, which I have mentioned in my voluntary disclosure, that knowingly, purposefully, they have picked up most appealing point and jotted down in this report. What was there in the mind of investigator is that one pilot is asking second pilot, why did you switch off? Why did you cut off the engine? Mind it.
No, no, it just
I
says, as Amit said, why did you cut off? I did
exactly.
not. It doesn't
I will
actually
read out.
give a full,
Ma'am,
it
I will
doesn't,
read out.
yeah,
Ma'am,
please read out. I'm also going
I
to
will
pull it
read
out.
out.
Can we have that
Why,
version of the report on our screen,
okay.
please? Yeah,
Yeah, in front
go
of me.
ahead.
Why did
Yeah.
he is incorrect? It's a pronunciation mistake, active and passive sentence. Why did he cut off? This was the precise sentence. He could have
Yes,
asked, did it cut off? They are two
yes,
different meaning. Now I am presuming
yes,
from investigator's point of view that it must be most appealing, most important observation on his part, which he thought should get a place in his preliminary report. Okay, ma'am. There
yeah.
is a possibility other pilot might have seen physically that he is cutting off. I am not making a negation. I am
No,
just a
but the
hypothesis.
same transcript says the other pilot responded that he did not do so.
Absolutely correct. So there, that is also recorded. For the best purpose of writing it over here, why it has been recorded here must be known to the investigating committee. The last point is that if you see in such a beginning, there are 2 points on the page number 15. One is the progress of the investigation. They are saying it is only preliminary report.
Right.
Okay. And they say full investigation is continuing. Okay, ma'am. And the full investigation report may come after a year or 2 years, nobody knows. But last but two line, it says at this stage of investigation, there are no recommended actions to Boeing 737 GE and this thing. What does it
Yes.
mean? It is
It,
either they are responsible, they are accountable. They might have written anybody, they have to substantiate what they have written in the court of law.
the
If
problem,
somebody
sir,
challenges, so
let me come in. Yeah.
ma'am, let me complete my argument. Unless until they are thoroughly convinced, now all the four people available in the panel will agree. They would not have any doubt in their mind that this investigation committee had in full access of SSCBR readout, full
Yes.
access last 2 hours, and they had full access of DFDR recordings. All the parameters have been decoded. They had full access. So before writing these sentences in this very report, they must have thought over
Okay.
1,000
Let
times,
me get
deliberated,
the actual.
deliberated.
So let me basically you're saying either accepted or rejected. If you accept
Perfectly.
it, take it.
Okay.
If you accept it, take it at face value. On face
Exactly.
value, yeah. So let's get Wing Commander Panikkar and Captain Amit to come in on this quickly. Wing Commander Panikkar, let's start with you. Okay, let's say we take the report at face value. I actually don't know what it's telling me, except it's telling me that there's no problem with Boeing and GE right now. That said, the DGCA just in the last few hours asked for all the fuel switches to be checked, right? So the fact is that this is a dynamic situation. It is a dynamic situation. Once again, Group Captain, let Wing Commander respond to what you said. Wing Commander Panikkar, go ahead.
Okay. First is that as an aviation regulator, they would have acted as a matter of abundant caution. You know that there
Okay.
is some problem happening somewhere in the world on a particular type of aircraft, and you want to check, hey, do we have the same problem?
Yeah.
Is it there in our country as well? We are operating the 787, we are operating 757, we are operating the 737, the 737 MAX. We've all got these Boeing aircraft with the similar genre of fuel control switches. So, as a matter of abundant caution, I would imagine that the DGCA has mandated that all operators check this. That's number one. Okay. The
Yeah.
second part of it is that other regulators across the world are also listening and watching. You just had the most horrific and the first Dreamliner accident, after nearly 4 million hours, approximately 1,200 Dreamliners flying across the world, the first major accident on a Dreamliner, right?
Yeah.
So the whole world is watching very, very carefully. I don't think at this point in time anybody can be given a clean chit until such time that we ascertain as to what is the root cause.
Can I ask you something? Can I ask you something? Does the report, as someone who's flown the Dreamliner, what did the report say to you? What did you take away from the report, Wing Commander Panikkar?
Okay. The report has just come 2 days back, but let me go back a little bit to the day of the accident on the 12th of June. I was sitting in Vienna on my way to Washington. So an aircraft was supposed to come from Delhi to Vienna. We were supposed to take that aircraft to Washington and then operate back. That is the time in the morning in which we heard about Air India 171. And to all indications and actions which indicated a loss of thrust on both engines simultaneously or near simultaneously.
Yeah.
The first reaction was disbelief. It has never ever happened before in civil aviation. When you cast your mind back on what happened to the miracle on the Hudson and Sullenberger, that pilot had 3,000 feet of altitude to play around with when he ran into that flock of geese which disabled both the engines. He had enough altitude to turn around, look for a place, see if he can do a relight, and finally put it down on a flat piece of surface, which in this case happened to be the Hudson River. There were no obstructions in between, right? In this particular case, there is absolutely no chance. What do? Immediately after takeoff, if both engines go. If your gear is down and if you still have the runway ahead of you, try and put her down and then do something about it. Here, there was no such option. There was no such case.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me go a little bit more elaborate on this. When we talk about the RAT, what is the RAT? The RAT is the ram air turbine. There are 5 conditions for the RAT to deploy automatically. The first of which is if both engines have failed. The second is if all the 3 hydraulic system pressures are low. Do remember that on the Dreamliner, we've got 3 hydraulic systems. We've got a left, we've got a right, and a center, all of which are independent of each other.
Yeah.
These are all high-pressure hydraulic systems. They are 5,000 PSI systems. Just to give you an idea, most of the other aircraft, the hydraulic systems are 3,000 PSI. These are very high-power hydraulic systems. And then there are 2 more systems. One is loss of all electrical power to the captains and the first officers' flight instruments, the loss of all the 4 electrical pumps in flight, and the loss of all the 4 electrical motor pumps, and an engine fails on takeoff or landing. These are the 5 conditions.
Yeah.
So now the automatic deployment of the RAT would have taken place the moment any of these conditions happened.
Sure.
So by my thinking, it would have come the moment the second engine has transitioned from run to cutoff. The signal is given to the RAT and the RAT deploys.
Right.
But it takes time for the RAT to deploy.
But the central question then remains: how did the fuel control switches transition from run to cutoff? Captain Amit saying, let me bring you in, and then Group Captain, and then Aditya. Captain Amit, go ahead.
So these are we have softwares like in the report they have called out FADEC. So engine electronic control units, which are basically managing the whole the engines, how the fuel flow valves operate, the ignition, etc. So, for example, if there is if you are starting an engine and there is a problem starting an engine, so the system will automatically attempt relights, which means cut off fuel flow, then reintroduce, then cut off, which means the system is constantly trying. In this case, also, if you read on the right engine, the system was continuously cutting off and introducing. So it is independent of the physical position of the switch. Physical position can only be determined by the CVR if you hear any click or any sound like that, similar sound, through spectroscopy, which means frequency We have to eliminate other frequencies to determine this particular switch movement. Otherwise, the switch can move on its own, like you said, that the chip issue, in which it was envisaged that if you do not do certain maintenance action within 11,000 hours, there could be a possibility that the valves close. And the new AD, the UK AD, talks
Yeah.
about the valve remaining open. So in case of a fire or something, the engine or APU fuel shutoff valve is supposed to close automatically, but it could be possible that it doesn't close, which means it continues to feed fuel to the fire. So that is the UK AD
Yeah.
referencing to the FA1. So that is another possibility. So uh, it is possible that the fuel control valves operate independently, but there would be indications inside the cockpit, number of indication chimes, and the important that the CBR transcript is known what was happening within the 10 seconds when the fuel control switches or the valve transition to shut off and then run. So was there any discussion between the crew, or because the co-pilot was flying, so the captain would have taken over? That would have taken some time. And then I would like to talk about certain hooks. We have three hooks basically. We have the airborne time of 0839. Then we have the hydraulic power generation. We have the fuel cutoff at 4.2, hydraulic power generation at 4.7. But they haven't given us the RAD deployment time. But if we work backwards from 4.7, the hydraulic power generation takes about 5 seconds. We go back 5 seconds. The RAD deployment takes 2 seconds. This is given in the manuals, the maintenance manuals. So we have 7 seconds. And for the engine to spool down to give a signal to the RAD, it will take maybe 1 second or 1.5 seconds. So we come back to the airborne time if you work backwards. So the whole timeline doesn't tally. Indeed, there has been some movement of the switches with or without any pilot input, but the engines have failed well before these switches operated.
That's really important. You are saying, so look, the report insinuates, it doesn't say, the report insinuates the fuel switches transition and therefore the engines fail. You are saying the engines have failed and then the fuel switches have moved.
Correct. If you see the visuals that you were playing of the aircraft taking off, so just before, just as the aircraft crosses the hut and we see the aircraft getting airborne, there's a plume of smoke which comes out. So that is not the dust which comes out from the wingtips or the wingtip vortices that we see. It is coming from the engines. And I have seen videos of engine failures on ground, and we have a smoke trail coming. So if you see the smoke which comes out, so that is an indication that there is an engine trouble here. And that is just about the
Well,
point.
by the way, if I may ask you one quick question and then 30 seconds closing comments to Group Captain and Aditya. Sorry, we're out of time. Is it not true that if the engines had failed before the fuel switches, then the pilots would have actually had to cut off and run them again?
Correct.
That's what right?
But then there were too many things happening. We have to.
Too many things happening.
As the two engines failed, the displays in front of the co-pilot would have gone blank, so the captain would have taken over. So handover, take over.
Right.
So
which is why we need the entire cockpit conversation to actually know what was being discussed. All right. Very quickly, Group Captain, 30 seconds. Aditya, 30 seconds, closing words to Sharath. Yes. Group Captain, Bajpai, sir.
Ma'am, I will say 3 categorical statements and leave it to the wisdom of the panelists to decide upon. Number 1, to best of my knowledge and technical awareness, the fuel control switch position, cutoff or run is duly recorded in DFDR. The fuel control valve position, closed or open, is duly recorded time-wise in DFDR, which would have been collaborated with the CVR transcript by the August Investigating Committee. Number
Okay.
one sentence, this was. Number two sentence, luckily we have got two senior captain in our panel. Sir, this fuel control switch in this particular flight has been operated 3 times. Number one, when we were attempting to start the engine.
Yeah.
Second time, when in air, manually, knowingly or inadvertently, it has moved from run to cutoff position. Third time, it has been moved in an attempt to
To bring it
successfully
back.
relight both the engine. It had moved, and when the debris were found, that time also the switches were found in the run position. This was
Correct.
my categorical position. So in this situation, can we doubt anything on the serviceability of fuel switch? Not third thing, whether SAIB issued by FAA, based on which yesterday DGCA issued the advisory. Now, to best of my information through the resources, it is that all Air India aircrafts are perfectly all right with respect to the locking mechanism. That input
Okay.
I have got.
So, so, so
Number two, other two advisories, the GA advisory service bulletins and the UK regulatory authorities AD are not applicable to best of mine and my knowledge on this ill-fated flight.
Okay, I literally have to start closing now. So, Aditya, very quickly, and then Wing Commander Sharad Panikkar. The one point that someone may take issue with in what Group Captain has said is there enough evidence to say that the switches were manually moved? Yes, the switches moved 3 times. They were obviously turned on to take off. Then they transitioned 3 seconds later from run to cut, and then they brought back, and therefore they come back to run. So that's obvious. The debate is, were they manually done or not? That is the debate. That is the whole debate. And Captain Amit Singh just said that he believes the engines failed before the fuel control switches were moved. Very quickly, Aditya, really quickly, please. Sorry.
All right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. Thanks, Barkha. So regarding the point that Captain Singh made about the thrust being lost potentially even at the time of rotation itself, that should show up in alerts from the ICAS, that is the engine alert system. Now that there is no mention of any alerts, at least in the preliminary investigation report. That is what we would have expected to see. Second, the fuel control switches, I should again point out, are fully manual, which is to say that they cannot be tripped electrically, as far as I know, and they have to be, they have to be moved manually by the
But
pilots. However,
there is an advisory on their locking mechanism, and there is a directive on the valves, which are like a
Exactly.
faucet for
Yes.
the fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll come to that. So look, while the switches have to be moved manually, they work in interface with the FADEC. So the inputs from the switch go to the FADEC, and from the FADEC to the valve. So you cannot move the switches, but obviously once you move the switch, what happens to the valves is mediated by the FADEC. So I think we also have to make a distinction on how was the state of the switch actually sensed. That's
Okay.
also, I think, something that probably
Okay,
needs to be determined.
I'm
Again, has to
sorry.
come from the DFTR. But all right,
I'm
I think
sorry to
I
rush
can safely
you.
stop
I'm
there.
sorry to rush you. No, I'll just Wing Commander Sharad Panikkar. We have to close.
I
I'm
can
going to
safely
give you a
stop there.
last word. Yeah, I'm going to give you a last word here, just on this whole debate about the pilots manually, for whatever reasons, having moved a switch 3 seconds after takeoff. That has to first suppose that it was done manually. Secondly, Captain Amit brings in a new theory that the engines failed and then the switches were moved. Go ahead, sir. Closing comments.
I think that is more than likely, because if the procedure for restarting a dual engine failure is to switch off the fuel control switches and then put them back on and then manually select the rat, this is the procedure. It's simply not envisaged at takeoff, but this is certainly what would happen at altitude. So he brings out a very valid point. Some event has happened. There is a loss of thrust.
Yeah.
Something has happened which has caused this. That is obviously both the engines failing to develop thrust, possibly an engine failure, okay, which has necessitated taking almost immediate actions. That is to switch off your fuel control switches, putting them back on, and then selecting the rat.
Okay.
So this is a distinct possibility. But that again, the other gentleman, the technical guy out there, he has a very valid point. When the fuel control switch is moved to run, it makes contact with multiple micro switches, all of which send different signals to different parts of the aircraft. One sends a signal to the FADEC, one sends a signal there. The FADEC is just full authority digital engine control, also called the EEC, engine electronic control. And this sends signals to various parts, which can cause...
I have to call all four of you back again. I'm totally out of time. I'm so sorry. We'll say thank you. Yeah, Amit, you have one sentence? One sentence?
We are thumbsing up.
180 knots. Flight
Yeah.
radar shows maximum 180 knots at 21 feet. Thereafter, the speed starts decaying. 177, 74, 72, which means the engines are failed at 21 feet or close about.
So both Wing Commander Panikkar and Captain Amit Singh believe the engines failed before the fuel control switches were actually moved, what is called transitioned in the report that everybody agrees, selectively quotes the cockpit voice recorder. Group Captain Bajpai says, take it or leave it when it comes to the report. I think a lot of people in the pilot community are not taking it. The Global Pilots Forum is saying too many unanswered questions, which are leading to speculative theories, which is the worst thing we can do when we think about those who are not alive to defend themselves. We don't know yet. And I think we should have the humility to say we don't know. Yes, Sharath? Yeah.
An engine will never relight unless the fuel control switch isn't run.
Absolutely. So it was
Okay,
brought back. That we know.
One sentence.
Yeah.
One sentence.
I have to close. I have to
One
close.
sentence.
Yes.
There are many reasons, but three most prominent reasons for engine getting failed when it has gone to the air. One is the fire. Second is the turbine RPM protection unit. Third is the asymmetric thrust. All these three conditions, next time I will explain, is not
Okay.
possible. Not possible. And
Okay,
once such a
the
serious
debate-
emergency
debate-
has taken place, engine cannot be relighted. They are not.
All I will say is this. The report says engine 1 did relight, engine 2's deceleration could not be contained. If this plane had a few more seconds, the pilots were trying to revive the engines. If they had just a few more seconds, the fate of Air India 171 may have been very different. Please do consider this the next time you sit and make an armchair judgment about the pilots. We do not have answers to many questions yet. We have to wait for those answers to emerge based on evidence, not speculation. Thank you very much, gentlemen. To Captain Amit Singh, to Wing Commander Sharath Panikkar, Professor Paranjpe, and Group Captain Bajpai, thank you. And to our audience, thank you so much. It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.